Dear Chinese automobile sector, it pains our heart to write these thoughts down. You have been a strong pillar of the Chinese economy. You have given millions of Chinese citizens the joy of riding and owning cars. You have earned the distinction of being a shameless industry which is unapologetic about its criminal behavior. You have so many records to account for, from the world's most dangerous and unsafe car to the world's lightest one. You had so many feathers in your cap. Oh dear automobile sector of China, you have earned such a reputation for yourself. Around the world, when the real car makers were scratching their heads to bring out new design and technologies for their models, you were waiting patiently. During your time here, you mastered the art of plagiarism. You never let the Chinese people down and simply copied popular car design from around the world. Today, you dare to point fingers at India. Today, a guttural pamphlet like Global Times is declaring a failure of Make in India program. That's where you made the mistake, and now we will expose you. Hi and welcome. You are watching TFI English, the national socio-political analysis arm of the TFI Media Group. I'm your host Tribhuvan, and this is our reply to Global Times' shoddy piece on Ford's exit from India. It took only one exit out of India for China to begin rejoicing. Recently, Ford Motors announced it was wrapping up its Indian manufacturing operations, effectively calling it quits out of the world's second most populated country owing to losses in 2-decade run marred with utter failure. China couldn't be happier, and the Chinese Communist Party, via its mouthpiece Global Times, has sought to paint a doomsday picture for India. With the exit of Ford, Global Times wants us to believe the Indian story is over. Following its usual pattern, Global Times called in a few Chinese experts to chime in with thoughts about Ford's exit from India. Now, Ford will supply cars to India by importing them on request. Two manufacturing facilities in India, one in Tamil Nadu's Chennai and other in Gujarat's Sanand. The combined manufacturing capacity of these two facilities is 450,000 units. However, Ford was operating these plants at just around 20% of the installed capacity. So, are the Indian people to be blamed if they are rather decisive in this rejection of Ford? Or is it for the company to introspect what went wrong for it in India? Global Times has made rather flagrant claims in its article, throughout which it quotes some experts who have very dystopic view of India's automobile sector. The following lines can be found in the Global Times article. Ford's move is another example of the failure of the Indian government's Make in India strategy despite the so-called political partnership with the US, Chinese experts said. US automaker Ford Motors' recent decision to stop making vehicles in India dealt another blow to the South Asian country's goal to bolster its manufacturing industry under Prime Minister Narendra Modi and laid bare growing risk and difficulties for foreign companies in India. The truth is, Ford's exit from India was entire of its own making. It in no manner reflects a failure of the Make in India initiative. Ford has consistently been a poor performer in the Indian market, despite a variety of car makers entering the country and flourishing in it soon enough. For 2 decades, Ford has simply failed to establish itself in India, and much of it stems from a lack of commitment towards the Indian market and consumers. Ford was simply not putting in the effort to carve a space for itself in India. It mindlessly established plants to manufacture 450,000 vehicles annually but paid close to no heed to catering to Indian consumers and strategizing its run in the country. Ford failed to concentrate on a particular segment and thought that making 5 of its cars available for Indians will somehow fascinate us, while also ensuring that Ford becomes a market leader. That's now how the automobile sector works in India. Maruti Suzuki is the market leader, and it has several cars to offer in practically every segment. Hyundai is catching up. Similarly, Tata, Mahindra and Mahindra, Honda, Toyota and Kia are posting successes because they have a definite strategy on how to go about their operations in India. And much of that involves focusing on one particular segment at first and then deciding whether they want to diversify their portfolio. Anyhow, the failure of a car maker to record a success in India is not a cross for Modi government to carry. Ford was unsuccessful in India even before 2014, when Make in India was not a thing. The reality is that Maruti Suzuki is beginning to mark some shaky monthly sales because Indians are now buying vehicles from other makers as well. Indian demand post-pandemic remains strong as more and more Indians are turning towards private vehicles to ensure their safety from unnecessary exposure to coronavirus. India has the second largest population, and if in such demography, car makers are unable to register profits, they must seriously introspect on what is going wrong for them alone, even when competitors continue to flourish in Indian markets. On the other hand, in number that speak to the Chinese untimely demise of the Chinese automobile sector, auto sales in China fell 12.4% in June from the corresponding month of a year earlier. China's overall sales stood at 2.02 million vehicles in June. According to the CAAM, China's domestic passenger car sales growth rate was expected to reach 10% in 2021, with the sales of new energy vehicles exceeding 2 million, a record high, or a year-on-year increase of 46%. In May this year, China's auto sales fell by 3% on a year-on-year basis instead. China is not getting enough semiconductor chips, and this has essentially killed the country's automobile sector. A 12.4% year-on-year drop suggests that China's auto sector has catastrophically been impacted by the semiconductor chip shortage. Chinese President Xi Jinping is ravaging China's economy. With all pervasive crackdowns and witch hunts aimed against private enterprise, business and entire sectors, Xi Jinping is making investors flee China, who are turning to India now, among other countries. For example, China is cracking down hard on its IT and tech sectors. The value of China's 10 major tech companies had dissipated by over $800 billion until May this year itself. So China is not the country any tech company would want to invest in. Outflows from the Chinese tech stocks due to the regulations in China seem to be resulting in inflows for the Indian tech companies, contributing to the Indian IT and tech sectors becoming one of the biggest gainers following the coronavirus outbreak. Despite the UN Conference on Trade and Development report stating that global FDI flows plunged by 35% due to COVID, FDI in India increased by 27% to $64 billion in 2020 from $51 billion in 2019. The Indian equity markets, meanwhile, have now emerged as the best performing among the global peers on a year-on-year and year-to-date basis on the back of robust retail and institutional participation and better earning prospects. India's gross domestic product grew at a record pace of 20.1% in the first quarter of financial year 22, the highest ever GDP growth in a single quarter. Thereafter, the GST collection number released on Wednesday for August showed a 30% increase from the same month the previous year and crossed $1 trillion mark for the second consecutive month. India's economic performance and as a consequence, foreign companies attracted for it remains unscathed, which is not the case with China. Chinese companies have been silently stealing designs of every expensive car you have wanted to lay your hands on. Chinese copy car industry is bigger than you can imagine. You name any car that you always wanted to own, and we bet that China has produced its clone. Mercedes GL Class, BMW X1, Toyota Innova Crista, Porsche Cayman, Lamborghini Diablo, Mercedes-Benz C-Class and Cadillac Escalade, McLaren are just some of the world-class cars that China has copied. China's copy-paste domestic automobile industry is an embarrassment. China does not even bother to change the logo of vehicle manufacturers after copying their exterior and interior designs from foreign car makers. As such, for China to try and paint a doomsday picture of India's automobile sector is indeed rich and could not be farther from reality.